Good evening. Let me start with a big shout out to the millions and millions of Europeans who took the trouble in the last couple of days to go out and vote. I think it's a good sign for European democracy that more people turned up than many, many years before. I also believe people understand, and this is also my experience traveling around Europe in the last couple of months, that their lives, their destinies are intimately linked with the choices we make in the European Parliament, in the European Commission and the Council. So here we are. Voters have spoken, citizens have spoken. The result is clear. First of all, let me congratulate those who have won additional seats in this Parliament. Well done. I also have to say that, as you know, and as you will certainly remind me of, my political family has lost seats. We have lost seats, and this means that we have to be humble. We have to be clear what our program is going to be. But I'm also optimistic on the basis of what I've heard across Europe in the last couple of months. People want us to do something about the climate crisis, urgently. People want us to make sure that social injustice is also tackled at the European level. People want us to make sure that big corporations finally start paying fair taxes. And people want us to make sure that we can work together with fellow Europeans to solve the problems that we can no longer solve only at the national level. That is why I will repeat my proposition to work with other progressive parties in this Parliament to try and build a program that addresses the aspirations, the dreams, and also sometimes the fears of our fellow Europeans. That we create a platform on the basis of progressive politics, forward-looking, dynamic. Stability is not the first word that comes to mind when I think of Europe. Stability means keeping things as they are. I don't think that's what Europe needs. Europe needs to dynamically look towards a future and take the necessary steps to bring that future closer. This is what we need to do. This is what people ask of us. And if we deliver on these points, then we can show that progressive, constructive, cooperative politics delivers results and that nationalism only delivers fears and hate. So once again, my offer is on the table. Let's sit together with progressive forces in this Parliament. Let's try and find a program for the next 5 years that will prepare Europe for the 30 years to come. Thank you very much to everyone who took the trouble to go and vote.
Thank you, and we have time for a couple of questions. If we start with Christoph Schmidt from Trouw.
Good evening, Christoph Schmid from the Dutch newspaper Trouw. Given the fact that both the EPP and the S&D lost seats in more or less the same proportion, which is an important signal from the voters, how can you possibly claim or put a bigger claim on the Commission presidency than Mr. Weber?
First of all, I'm not putting any claims at all. You're right to say that these two parties who have always had a majority in the European Parliament, now for the first time, both lost so that we no longer have a majority. But in that sense, the European Parliament is a perfect reflection of what happens in most member states. This is also the situation in most of our member states. It has become more difficult to form coalitions. That's why I think, I'm not claiming anything. I think, if you lose an election, if you lose seats, you have to be modest. But at the same time, you also have to take the responsibility because we still have more than 150 seats in this Parliament, this new Parliament, that gives us a huge responsibility to do something positive for European society in the next 5 years. And to do that, we will need to build coalitions. And on the basis of a program and a coalition, then we can start playing the Game of Thrones on who gets which job. But that's the right order. That's why I'm not claiming anything. I hope I can bring together a coalition with a program we need for the next 5 years. And then we will see who can lead that in the European Commission.
Okay, thank you very much. I have Christoph from the Polish Press Agency running to the microphone. Thanks.
think you said that stability is not the first thing which comes in mind when you are thinking about Europe. Does it mean that you are rolling out cooperation with the EPP? Because Mr. Weber just said that this stability is needed here.
Well, my worry is that whenever I hear Weber or the EPP talk of stability, they mean let's keep things how they are. That, I think, if you look at the result of the election, is not an option. So I want to work with parties who understand that we need to make some really bold decisions on the climate crisis, on social injustice, on the need to transform our economy into a sustainable economy, on the need to tax companies that don't pay tax today. And anyone from a democratic party that shares these ideas, I want to talk to and try and build a coalition with. The only ones I've said all along the campaign I don't want to work with is the extreme right. I will never have an agreement with them because we don't share the vision of Europe, and we certainly don't share the vision of humanity and humanism. So I could never enter into an agreement with them. But all the other parties, if they share our vision of a progressive Europe that really needs to take steps forward now, I think I will work with.
Okay, and we'll just take one final question from Thomas Meyer from the Standard.
Good evening, Mr. Timmermans. I think apparently you don't like the word claim, but I think there are millions of Europeans tonight who want to know who will be the next president of the Commission. So would you perhaps prefer the sentence that I want to become president of the European Commission? And a second question, if I may, if we look to the figures there, the Rainbow Coalition is apparently very close to a simple majority, which is necessary to vote for the next president in the parliament. We know that Mr. Macron has doubts on the system of Spitzenkandidates. What would you do in the next days and weeks to convince Mr. Macron and the majority of the head of states who nominate the next president of the Commission? Thank you.
Well, on the first part of your question, Mr. Meyer, I would say, I would wager that the vast majority of European citizens aren't that interested who's going to lead the next Commission, are more interested into what is that Commission going to do, are they finally going to do for us to tackle the climate crisis, to do something about social injustice, etc. And then if you have a good program, then I think we need to find an agreement who could lead that program. I would be honored to lead that program, but in that order. So, yes, of course, it's interesting to write about this and to talk about this, but frankly, I believe, also after having campaigned in so many member states, that citizens are more interested in what are you actually going to do for us in the next 5 years. And on the second part of your question, we will need a majority in the European Parliament. And if I look at the figures now, I understand why Manfred Weber says stability, because he also sees that there is a possibility of a majority without the EPP. Now, I'm not saying there should, by definition, be a majority without the EPP. I'm only saying in a democracy it is healthy that not one party is unavoidable in a majority. So I will be looking for a progressive majority to do the things that our citizens expect from us. And if that is with people who understand which are the subjects we need to tackle, who understand the seriousness of the climate crisis and are prepared to take the necessary measures, I take them from anywhere, except, as I said, from the extreme right. But let's see if we can build a majority on the basis of that program for the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much.